Hello everyone, I'm joined with Scheherazade, who has just written a book under the pseudonym Elen Samuel called A Sceptical GP. Welcome.
Hello.
Firstly, would you mind giving us a quick overview to tell us what your book is about?
Well, the first thing to make clear is that it's aimed at the informed general public, not particularly doctors. And of course, not all doctors will like everything it says. It's a personal view of general practice in the UK over the last 30 years, written to inform and to entertain. The overall aim is to delve into the background of what GPs do when they see a patient, and to give patients a lot more insight into what goes on, and also how the patient can use the system more effectively. And to do this, I give a historical narrative based on my own experiences, including lots of patient stories, and cover lots of common conditions and misapprehensions, and cover something about evidence medicine and a lot of detail on health systems all over the world.
So how has your role sort of changed over the years? Do you think patients have a different idea of what GPs do, maybe like 20, 30 years ago compared to now?
Well, while writing the book, I became conscious that the basic role of the GP hasn't changed very much at all. At the core of a consultation, there still has to be trust between two people coming to solve a problem from different standpoints and backgrounds. And that's still what GPs do and what's appreciated by the patient. But of course, the devil's in the detail. The range of treatments and conditions of work have changed completely, not always for the better. So this book is about giving people information and perspective, such as how to better evaluate messages from the media, and what drives people to access health services, and how, more particularly, how to use all the services in primary care, not just GP services, but pharmacists, physiotherapists, counsellors and even herbalists effectively. Because if we were starting a service from scratch, this would be where healthcare would be concentrated. And in some cases, it's the undue influence of doctors that has resulted in too much hospital treatment. And I think GPs are a bit caught between two stools here, because they're always used as the middleman. But in many cases, they don't have to be the middleman. They do as a gateway for referring to hospital, but not for every problem that a GP will come across. There are lots of other services out there in the community which deserve more use, and more use by the health service. The emphasis in the book is actually on self-help, and it gives a lot of information about the physiology of the body, which really isn't taught in schools. And a lot of people reading the press, there's a lot of stuff out there, but they miss crucial bits of physiology, which actually would help them to decide whether they need to consult a doctor, or whether somebody else would help them just as much.
And what about sort of the NHS as a political instrument? I mean, a lot of people say it's kind of a tool that's been used to sort of score political points. How do you see it now with the current influx of changes?
The NHS is bound to be a political instrument if it is to be a national service, and I've no objection to that. I think what I've done in the book is to tackle it from an international perspective. So I compare systems in Europe, America, and other parts of the world to show exactly where the NHS stands in its efficiency and value for money. I discuss it in detail from the various problems with political interference, especially more recently, but I also cover the period from its inception to the period of underfunding, and then the second period from the relative largesse of the Labour government to the current austerity. And I also compare the four systems within the UK. I discuss the changes in England, the recent changes, but that's obviously from the standpoint of an experienced GP, but now standing on the sidelines, because I'm now retired, so I haven't had any direct involvement in commissioning, although I was involved in commissioning as a medical manager. I would see a lot of good in commissioning. It was something that really interested me when I was a medical manager, but I can see it doesn't always solve the problems because of the difficulties that I saw with turf wars and so on. There were lots of turf wars, and the newspapers and the BMJ in books such as Bad Pharma are keen to point out the influence of business interests in health, driving more and more consumption of expensive treatments, not all of which improve people's health. And my book does this too. It's a very important message to get across. But what's often not mentioned is the role doctors play, because while most GPs are too overworked to tote the business, there's no doubt that specialists, even in the NHS, have an interest and a need to promote their speciality. One would think that with overloaded outpatient clinics, senior clinicians would welcome the chance to offload appropriate work to other health professionals, physiotherapists, optometrists, podiatrists, and so on. But there's always been a considerable resistance to this from doctors, even before payment for activity came in, because at bottom their funding and prestige depends on them having a lot of people waiting to see them. If you have an empty outpatient clinic, even if you're only seeing the people that you can really help, managers are going to cut your funding pretty quickly. And usually the hospital wants to control any work that's done outside. It's very difficult to set up new services. The senior consultant champions them, and that person often gets resistance from colleagues. So there's a lot about this in the book to try to understand why the drive to transfer services from hospital to out into the community, which after all is the big thing that all politicians want to do. It often doesn't happen, and it isn't only because there isn't any money, but the money is not a priority to people in the hospitals and in the higher echelons of medicine. So there's a lot of stuff like that in the book, which I think will be new to a lot of patients and some doctors.
And do you think these so-called turf wars are detrimental to the patient experience? I mean, is it about doctors kind of being protective about the services that they control and look after, and do you think that affects patient care?
Well, yes, I certainly saw some examples of this, and it's something that really good commissioning could make better. For instance, the tensions between physiotherapists and orthopedic surgeons and podiatrists are such that the available treatment, which could be, say, bunion surgery in a hospital, could be much better provided by an experienced and well-trained surgical podiatrist. We had one near us, and they provided an excellent service, but there was always a tension because the hospital consultants really didn't want their work being taken away from them, even though they were offloaded. And so ultimately that service, which the patients really appreciated, got taken away. Yeah, it can impact upon the patient.
Well, thanks very much for giving us an overview of your book.